So for my next trick, I want to talk about the SSASS trial. So the SSASS trial, I think, is one of the most important trials in hypertension in the last 10 years. They looked at, this was done in rural China, and they randomized 600 rural villages. So the unit of randomization is a village, and they were randomized either to low sodium salt, which is sodium chloride, 75% and 25% potassium chloride, or normal salt, 100% sodium chloride. And after 5 years, they found that the patients that were randomized to the low sodium salt had a lower systolic blood pressure, no significant difference at the diastolic. And to get that change in blood pressure, they had a drop in their sodium intake of about 15 millimoles a day. That's the amount of sodium found in 2 slices of bread or 1 slice of cheese. And they also had a compensatory increase in potassium intake, or about 21 millimoles a day, which is the amount of potassium in 2 bananas or 1 baked potato. And for those modest changes, they found pretty profound results. A 14% reduction in stroke, a 13% reduction in major adverse cardiac events, and a 12% reduction in total mortality. There are so few studies that get a total mortality result. This is really super impressive. Consequences to the high potassium or the increased potassium diet were modest. They only had 1 case of definite hyperkalemia. They had a comparable rate of definite, probable, or possible hyperkalemia. But the thing you need to understand, they were studying a low-risk population, so anybody at risk of hyperkalemia was excluded if they reported serious kidney disease or use of medicines that might substantially elevate the blood potassium levels. But there was no biochemical screening of kidney function or potassium levels. Also, during the study, there was no routine serum potassium measurements. They did do imaging, clinical, and laboratory data just based on clinical outcomes when needed. It kind of comes to the Samuel Shem House of God thing. If you don't take a temperature, you can't find a fever. Like, they didn't see much hyperkalemia, but they sure weren't looking very hard. So in summary, the SSASS trial showed that a modest increase in potassium intake paired with a modest decrease in sodium intake reduced stroke, major adverse cardiac events, and mortality. But it is a living, breathing manifestation and demonstration of the potassium switch. And this is kind of one of the new developments in renal physiology in the last, 15 years or something like that. And it is a profound expansion in how we think of potassium handling by the kidney. And so I want to kind of talk about the potassium switch a little bit. And so here we are in the distal convoluted tubule, and we have our sodium chloride co-transporter, and it works just like it says on the tin. It moves sodium from the tubular side into the body, and that sodium exits through the sodium-potassium ATPase. Potassium enters there and then is pumped out a potassium channel or flows down a concentration gradient, another potassium channel, and chloride has a dedicated chloride transporter on the basolateral membrane to get rid of that. But if you kind of drill down, if you get a decrease in the serum potassium, just based on the Nernst equation, that is going to hyperpolarize your cell. So you're going to increase the negative charge in the cell from that increased extracellular or decreased extracellular potassium. That's going to decrease intracellular chloride. Chloride is just going to get chased out by that negative charge. And that lower chloride is going to actually increase activity of Wnt kinase. And Wnt kinase kind of indirectly will then phosphorylate that sodium chloride co-transporter and upregulate it so it becomes more active, okay? And so, what's the consequences of that more active cell? Well, we'll have to go downstream to the principal cells in the cortical collecting duct. And here, normally, what you have is sodium will flow down its electrochemical gradient through the ENaC channel. That generates a negative charge in the tubule. It's an electrogenic movement of sodium, and that will draw potassium down. There's a couple of different channels, big K, ROM K. Regardless, potassium will flow out of there. And so you have potassium excretion in exchange for sodium reabsorption. And if you reabsorb all your sodium in the distal convoluted tubule, you'll have less sodium available to allow its activity at the ENaC channel, and you'll get less potassium excretion, and that will raise your potassium back up and restore potassium homeostasis. So this whole thing is triggered by a decreased serum potassium, and downstream you get decreased potassium excretion. That's the potassium switch. And so here's kind of the whole process. Decreases in serum potassium, hyperpolarizes the cell, boom, 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 decreased potassium excretion and sodium excretion. And the important thing is this runs in reverse. If you get an increase in serum K, that will depolarize the cell. This increases intracellular chloride. That increased intracellular chloride will decrease Wnt kinase activity. Decreased Wnt kinase activity decreases NCCT activity. And that will increase distal delivery of sodium. That will increase potassium and sodium excretion. That increased serum potassium actually acts like a thiazide diuretic. So the potassium switch means that an increased potassium intake acts like a thiazide diuretic, and the SSASS trial is this pragmatic demonstration of the potassium switch in action. I love it.